Hey everyone, so let's talk about the prototype pattern. Now, if we take the meaning of the word prototype, we have something that translates to an original model on which something is patterned. Now, in simple terms, what this is saying is that we have a template and we create stuff based off this template, just like this robot example here. We have a robot which is used as a template to create this red robot. So in programming terms is where when we have objects and we can create copies or clones of this object. That's all the prototype pattern allows us to do. We create copies of objects. And you may ask, all right, but when I use that? And I can answer you that's when you actually have a lot of expensive stuff bound to the creation of objects, or you have very specific cases where you have a very verbose way of declaring the object. Like the object has a lot of dependencies and it's easier to just extract all of them and create a clone of the object just so you don't have to instance all of the dependencies all over again. And now I know that's kind of abstract and even philosophical, but I'm about to give you a real example here. And just also before I move forward, just as a note here, the prototype that I'm talking about is the design pattern one, not about the JavaScript inheritance one, right? So, okay. So imagine that you have a store, right? So you have a store and people can buy stuff from your store, right? So pretty straightforward. This old guy with a mustache and a top hat that I like to use as examples, all of the videos, he can actually buy stuff from your store. But for this guy with the mustache to buy your stuff, he needs to have credit cards, right? So he needs to have credit cards. And on this instance, imagine that he can have multiple credit cards. So he can have, I don't know, a Visa one and a MasterCard one, whatever. But the point is, he can have multiple cards. And if we think about it, the cards may differ, but it's the same old guy with the mustache and the top hat, right? So it's the same information. So if we map this out, what we have is the credit card information, and we also have the user information, which would be the old guy with the top hat, correct? And then we also have a payment information, which binds these two entities, right? Pretty simple, pretty simple. The thing is, imagine that on your application, you had to map this out. And as I said, the user information is pretty much the same. What will change is the credit card information. And the payment information actually will keep the user information the same, but the credit card information would be different. So how could we map this out? Thinking that we could have a lot of other stuff like billing information or address information and other stuff related that we needed to create the payment information entity. So let's get straight to the example. Okay, so I have the project set up here. Pretty simple. I have an entry point here called main.javascript, and I'm about to create the entities. So the first entity that I will create is the user information one. So let's create the user information entity, user information.javascript, and what we have is a class, right? Class user information, and this class will have the username and also the email of the user, and we'll pretty much just set the username to the username provided in the constructor, and also the email to the email provided in the constructor. Now here's the magic, and here's where the prototype pattern would be applied. We have a clone function here which returns a new user information passing through this dot username and also this dot email. That's what the clone method on the design pattern that I'm talking about would do. It returns a new object with the same information, right? And let's create the same thing for the other stuff here. So we have user information. Let's create also a credit card information, and here we have credit card information.javascript, and also is also a class. Let me copy what I did here and also export the user information. So we have the credit card information, and for the credit card information we have the CVV and also the credit card number. So this dot CVV equals to CVV and credit card number equals to credit card number. And for the clone function, let's return a new credit card information with the CVV and the credit card number, right? So pretty simple. We have two pretty simple entities here. And so let's create now the payment information entity, which binds the user information and credit card information together. So payment information.javascript, and let's also copy these and let's rename this to payment information. For payment information we have the user information and we also have the CC information, right? So this dot user info equals to the user info provided on the constructor, and the CC info equals the CC info provided on the constructor. Now for the clone here, we want to return the payment information, and let's call a this.tvv this.userinfo.clone, and let's call this.ccinfo.clone. Now we have the clone function for the payment information. So if you think about it, we are basically creating here clones of the dependency. So we create a clone of the user information object and also a clone of the credit card information object. Now let's call them on the entry point. So let's create the user information first, and let's call new user information, and we receive a, let me just see the signature, we receive a username. Let's call it John, and an email, right? So John@gmail, and let's create the credit card info, credit card information, and we basically receive the CVV. Let's say it's 123, and the credit card number, let's say it's 13429, right? And then we can create finally the payment information. So payment information equals, let's actually import payment information here. So it's payment information passing through the user info first and then the CC info. Let me just standardize this to be just info. Now if we console log this, we will have the information here. Sorry, I forgot the new keyword. So now you can see that we have all the information here, and so we have the user info and the credit card info, right? So what if I want to create the second card for the old guy with the top hat? What should we do? We can just call the clone, right? So we can go here and say const second payment information equals equals payment information dot clone. And if I console log it, you can see that it's the cloned version, but it's actually undefined here. I think that I'm returning the wrong information here. Yeah, it's this.user, sorry. So now it's correct. We have the user information and we also have the credit card information. This is the same value. And if I change the second payment information dot ccinfo dot, let's change the credit card number, right? Let's change this property here to be just new info. And let's console log the second payment information again. You can see that we have new info here, and the first payment information actually has the credit card, the correct credit card number. And just so as you can see that this information hasn't changed yet, you can see that it remains the same, right? Even if I change the second payment information. So second payment, and let's say also the first payment, just so you can compare the objects. So if I console log it, you can see that the first payment is the same information, and the second payment, which would be the second card, has the same user information but a different credit card number. So that's about it. You can see that it's used in very specific cases, right? So the prototype pattern is used mostly when you have very expensive stuff related or bound when you create or instance an object, and when you have cases like that where you want to keep the dependencies the same when creating a new object. So I hope that makes sense. Have a good one.